very much hated my dad. She told me this like on multiple occasions, years apart, about how often she would pray that he would die because she felt like that was like the best outcome. She's like, well, if he dies, because the other thing was she didn't want to discredit his ministry.
Hmm.
So she was kind of hoping he would die before anything came out like it is now. So then that way he would die, whatever. She wouldn't have to deal with him. She would get a life insurance policy. She told that to multiple of my siblings. Like, and my dad, even if he's gonna watch this, he remembers. I remember them fighting because she said it to his face one day. Well, Dad, she kept saying that for years after, and she would tell it to me about how she prays that he would die so that she wouldn't have to deal with him more. Now, my mom was very physically heavily abused. I guess that segues into that is, yeah, my dad, um, my mom says that the abuse started at the very beginning of her marriage, and it was kind of in the sense of when they would fight, he would hit her, a punch, a slap.
My dad refuses to see that he's done wrong, and when my mom, on the off chance that she does, she just has a crying breakdown about it. So,
Mm.
yeah. I'm not interested in reaching either of them. They're both horrible people. I don't really care about them. I don't care about reaching them or helping them. They just need to quit hurting people.
Is no longer my parents' house is no longer my home. Like it was never a good home, but it used to feel like, I'd come home from work, right? And it's like I'm home now.
Yeah, at least it's
And
home.
even if it was a
Yeah.
screwed up, yeah, even if it was a screwed up situation, there was a feeling of this is where I belong. And now I have this permanent feeling of being displaced.
When thinking about the situation, the first thing that really stands out is that not one, not two, not three, but four of Steve Anderson's kids have spoken out to condemn him as a parent and as a husband. Steve Anderson has 12 kids, and every child that he has that has the freedom and the means to publicly shame him is doing it. And because this is the case, I'm almost shocked at the amount of people who are claiming that it's all a lie and all embellishments. That Steve Anderson is just like King David, who was attacked by his rebellious son, and so on and so forth. Now, drawing parallels from King David and Absalom to this situation is nonsense for a whole host of reasons. The biggest one being that King David was deeply in the wrong for how he handled Absalom and that whole situation in the first place. And secondly, David's situation came about because he was being punished for prior sin. And even in that situation, David had one child who was out to get him. In this case, 1/3 of Steve Anderson's whole spiel of children have publicly gone on record to denounce him. In what I've heard from the four kids, I firmly believe that the hurt, wrath, and bitterness towards their dad is genuine, and that Anderson does appear to have been a toxic parent towards his kids. However, even if you want to go with this story that Anderson and his loyalists are promoting, which is that the kids are whining, they're trying to slander their dad for ulterior motives, that still shows that Anderson is a failure as a parent. To have a strained relationship with all four adult children shows that Steve Anderson has failed to provide a bond of love, trust, and respect with his kids. However, this firm attitude that Anderson is innocent and in the right, despite all the evidence, reflects what Proverbs warns about. See, in Proverbs 26:16, the Bible says, "The sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason." What the Bible is saying is that someone who is a sluggard, or what we'd call a lazy bum, has this attitude that they're in the right, even if 7 other people were to all come together and explain to them that they're wrong. The sluggard ain't trying to hear it. What the Bible's teaching here is that patterns have a purpose. Whenever we are in conflict, or get criticized, or things that offend us or make us feel attacked come up, we have to ask ourselves, have I heard this before? Anybody can get lied on once. Anyone can get hated on once. However, when the same criticism comes our way for the second, third, and fourth time, it's time to really listen. Once the second person tells us that we're unprofessional, once the third person tells us that we have a drinking problem, once the fourth person lets us know that our relationship is moving too fast, we have to understand that what's repeated constantly is often the reality. We never want to have this attitude that Steve Anderson and his followers seem to have, that insist on something being the case even when child after child says that Pastor Anderson is abusive. Even after pastor and parent after parent criticizes him and points out how his parenting is toxic. Yes, we trust God over man. But so often, God speaks to us through all the people that he exposes us to. All of the saved, married family members who are begging us not to marry that person are not just being messy. The manager of that thriving company that has overseen employees for 15 years isn't just out to get us. The nationally ranked program who has sent several athletes to college doesn't just not know the game when it comes to us or our kid. Patterns have a purpose. When we hear it again, the Holy Spirit might have a word for us. One aspect of the situation that's kind of ironic is that for years, Steve Anderson has made his name partly off criticizing other pastors and figures, even though he has bonded with them or praised them in the past. Anderson and his followers will be quick to try to get somebody canceled or to poke holes in their ministry. Or at the very least, they go out of their way to explain why their movement is so much better than other churches or denominations or whatever the case is. I've seen this firsthand since I started posting content on YouTube. However, when it's their guy that's on the hot seat, suddenly everyone wants to see things as this gray area and give the benefit of the doubt and extend all this grace and trust that's never been extended to anybody else that they've witnessed. Now, our question is this. If we all observed the same situation develop, but the pastor in question wasn't Steve Anderson, but it was Tommy McMurtry or Joe Major or someone who isn't Steve Anderson or a close buddy, would people from his circle be this open-minded and this eager to defend that pastor's integrity? Because if the answer is no, what that means is that Anderson and all of his followers are what James would call respecter of persons. What this means is that how we see and respond to a situation depends primarily on who is in the situation. This is that boss who interviews Tim and Todd and knows good and well that Todd has the better resume, but is golf buddies with Tim's dad, so Tim gets hired. This is the play director that knows her daughter can't sing, but lets her get the lead anyways. This is the teacher that sees little Jimmy running around, acting a fool, disrupting class, but doesn't write them up because his mom is the principal. When someone is a respecter of persons, they choose personality over principle. They abandon everything that they generally know to be true in order to protect the people that they feel should be given priority. People even do this with themselves sometimes without realizing it. They'll get defensive when they're called out about something, when they know that if someone else had done what they did, they'd be heated at that person. What's ironic is that this is actually a flaw that David had during the conflict with Absalom. For those who don't know anything about this David and Absalom thing and don't know what I'm talking about, here's the Cliff Notes version of that story. King David sees a beautiful but married woman named Bathsheba. David focuses more on the beautiful part than the married part, and Bathsheba ends up pregnant, and her husband Uriah ends up dead. Nathan the prophet roasts David for this and reveals that David's family is now cursed. It starts when David's son Amnon sexually assaults his half-sister Tamar, but David doesn't do anything about it because Amnon is his son. And this is what causes the beef with Absalom, who was Tamar's brother. He's really angry that David didn't take action. And the end result of this whole thing causes Absalom to make it his mission to overthrow David. Now let's fast forward to the end of this movie and see David do the same thing again. See, during the third act of King David's civil war, David's men are fighting against Absalom's men to claim the kingdom. However, when David is in the boardroom preparing for battle, looking at film, David tells his general and his men that they need to capture Absalom, but not kill him. Mind you, David is fine with all of his men being killed, or all of his men killing Absalom's men, but even though Absalom committed treason, David is making sure that Absalom doesn't die. David makes a decision that goes against the principles that were established within God's nation because he wants to look out for his son. The conflict started with David not punishing Amnon when he should have, and it ended with David not punishing Absalom when he should have. The problem with a lot of Steve Anderson followers, with a lot of T.D. Jakes followers, with a lot of Jamal Bryant followers, with a lot of other believers who have a pastor or figure that they love, is that they can't let Amnon and Absalom take the heat even when they know the person deserves it. They can't accept that the person that they looked up to and cherished has turned out to be something that they never expected. However, as Christians, we're supposed to be tied to the principles of Christ, not the personality of an individual. When we look at this Anderson situation, another major criticism of Anderson's children that's been pushed to say that they can't be believed is their presentation. The biggest argument used is that 3 of the 4 children of Anderson who spoke out initially did interviews on this channel called Dead Domain, which is run by a man who identifies as a woman. They've also highlighted things such as the fact that one of the sons has long hair and a nose ring to imply that these children are worldly, ungodly, and deviant people who can't be trusted. Now, if that's the argument that's being made, that these kids are wicked and ungodly because they affiliate with the transgender or have an ungodly appearance or have a rebellious and bitter spirit, my question is this: who raised these children again? Who is their father? The Bible says that trees are known by their fruit, and that bad trees will bring forth corrupt fruit. So if these children are wicked people and have rebellious spirits and slander their own parents with these fictitious and embellished claims, what does that say about the tree that they came from? Presentation reflects preparation. These kids that don't have any sense or any morals, that falls at the feet of the parents. If the customer service at Popeyes is always whack, that falls at the feet of corporate. If the New York Jets are always terrible, that falls at the feet of the general managers. I've heard the same attitude within ministry. I've heard these church leaders complain that the youth in their church are worldly and ungodly, and I've always got the same question: who raised those kids and who pastors the parents of those kids? There's always a trickle-down effect. Solomon had 700 wives because David, his dad, had 8. Jacob had favorite kids because Isaac and Rebekah, his parents, did. And the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. The fish always stinks at the head. So instead of criticizing the children, ask what was happening in the household for the last 18 to 20 years that let them end up this way. One piece of this whole situation that I really haven't liked is this heavy focus on if Pastor Anderson is innocent or did anything wrong, and also if he's qualified to continue pastoring his church. First of all, the answer is no to both. I'm pretty sure I've made that clear. But here's the thing. Even if you wanted to somehow argue that the children are in the wrong and that Anderson was lied on and all this other stuff, here's the thing. One thing that we should all be able to agree on is that all 4 of Steve Anderson's adult children are carrying a lot of hurt, a lot of baggage, and that they have a broken relationship with their father. It's undeniable. No matter why you think this is the case, it couldn't be more obvious that all is not well within the Anderson family. So to see that Steve Anderson is putting this huge emphasis on him being innocent, him being qualified, him doing all this amazing work for God, and it's all about him being lied on by his kids. I haven't noticed any part of Steve Anderson that seems saddened by the state of the relationships that he has with his kids. It almost gives the impression that he really doesn't care about the fact that his kids have a terrible relationship with him. Only thing he's worried about is the fact that he's being criticized, he's being accused of abuse, people are calling him to step down. That's what he's spending all of his energy on. He's focused on salvaging his reputation and his ministry. There's all this talk about whether he needs to step down or not. But my question is this: how can Steve Anderson be cool to just keep on pastoring and going on about his business when he knows how toxic things have gotten between he and 4 of his kids? If Anderson is the man of God that he claims to be, if his church is as incredible as he's promoting it as, what would be the harm in him taking a 30 or a 60-day sabbatical to focus on mending relationships with his kids? What would it cost Steve Anderson to take a leave of absence, or at least make it clear that he loves his kids and has a desire to fix things and repair the wounded relationships? Steve Anderson served as an example of someone who tells on himself based on his priorities. In the middle of all this chaos and hurt, Steve Anderson is thinking about Steve Anderson. And Steve Anderson reflects the reality that people are defined by their priorities. As Jesus says, where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. Anderson is spending all of his time talking about his ministry, his reputation, his resume and accomplishments, because the most valuable thing to Steve Anderson is himself and not his family. Even if Anderson was innocent of all wrongdoing, which he's not, the fact that he'd be spending all this time fighting to clear his name and not fighting for the heart of his children, it says everything. He's busy gaslighting members, giving ultimatums. He doesn't care about the hurt that he's caused. Anderson puts himself at the center of everything. And if you don't believe me, just look at this clip of him talking 7 years ago.
Do you like the power of being a pastor?
I definitely like the power to influence masses of people. Absolutely. I like the power to be able to speak and thousands of people hear me within 24 hours. So yeah, I do like that. You know, because I want to, I want to do something big with my life.
You heard it out of the man's mouth. No mention of Jesus, no mention of serving, no mention of God's plan. No. Anderson told us that he enjoys power, he enjoys influence, he enjoys being heard, he enjoys being followed and admired. So when it all hits the fan, he's trying to make sure he doesn't lose his soapbox. Anderson's attitude lines up perfectly with how he's handled this tragic situation. I keep hearing that Anderson is David, but David was heartbroken about the Absalom situation. His focus wasn't all on keeping the throne. David was heartbroken about what had happened to Absalom and their relationship. When we watch people long enough, we'll always see the kind of person that they are based on what they put first when it really comes down to it. People can say they love their families, that they love God, or whatever they want to say. But when we look at their actions in key moments, it becomes clear what the most important thing really is, whether it's money, accomplishments, their own comfort. We have to make it a point to not always just listen to what people say, but to watch what they choose in pivotal moments, because that'll show us the real them. Anderson has showed us the real him. But do we believe it, and can we accept it? See, as I record this, the stench from this whole debacle is still looming over Steve Anderson. Now, it's pretty unlikely that he's going to get arrested or lose custody of his kids. He's probably going to remain pastor of his church. He's probably going to keep getting views and support. And he's probably not ever going to admit to any wrongdoing as it relates to this situation. And the saddest part is that this is just one of many church scandals that have happened and will happen. It's just par for the course. But what we have to decide as Christians is how we are going to see those scandals, how we are going to respond when the scandal involves someone that we like, and how we're going to live differently based on what God teaches us through these scandals.
tell you something? I'm sick of it, and I'm not gonna back down, and I'm sick
like this kind of preaching.
Then get the hell out of my church!
Is this your king? Huh?
What are you coming up here to do? You want to come take over the service? Huh? What do you want? What?
I just want a prayer, man.
Get out of here.
Can I get a little grace?
No, you can't. No, you get out of here. Get him out of here.
I give you my all. I'm giving you all of